This is the story of how I got interested in Feng Shui and how I got into the Feng Shui path. Um, as I had told you in a previous video, I graduated as an architect in my country of origin, which is Ecuador. And then when I came to the United States, I found that I would not be able to practice without going back to school for a few years. And that was not an option at the time. So I had this conversation with a friend who was the owner of a very nice health food store in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. And she said, well, what are you going to do if you cannot practice your profession? And I had told her that maybe I would look into landscaping, architecture, or something like that, because I had always been fascinated with Japanese gardens. And she said, well, if you like Japanese gardens, you probably would like Feng Shui. And I didn't even know what Feng Shui was at the time, but I liked the sound of it. And so from then on, whenever I had this conversation again with other people, when they asked me what I did in Ecuador before I moved to the United States, and I told them about this situation, I would tell them, well, maybe I'll try Feng Shui someday. And one of the people, one of the women that I had told this to at some point, she brought me a brochure, and she told me, well, this is for a journal, a Feng Shui journal, and if you are serious about getting into Feng Shui sometime, I think you should subscribe to this journal. So I did. And that was my first exposure to Feng Shui. It was called the Feng Shui Journal, which unfortunately was only in circulation for a few years. But it was a collection of the best authors at the time in the West on Feng Shui. And I got exposed to many different types and theories and ideas about Feng Shui. And then my first book I won as a door prize. We had gone to a holistic event with my husband, and we were at a lecture, and we had come in a little bit late, and the lights were off because they were showing a slideshow. And somebody tapped on my shoulder and handed me a book on Feng Shui. And I didn't know what was going on, so I asked her, why are you giving me this? And she said, we were giving this as a door prize, and we first took out a name out of the box, and it was your name. And since you weren't here, we decided to take out another piece of paper. And the one that we took out, it was your husband's name. So we figured that Spirit had earmarked this book for you, and we should just keep it for you instead of getting more names out of the box. So that's how I got my first Feng Shui book. And so I was fascinated by the information that I was acquiring about Feng Shui through the journal and this first book that I got as a door prize. And so I read the book from beginning to end, and then I found out that this author had actually written 2 more books on the subject. So I went ahead and purchased the other 2 books. And so after I had read these 3 books from this same author, I started to apply and try to do the Feng Shui of my own home. And it seemed that at every step I got stuck. And there was, it seems like my home was just full of exceptions. I just couldn't go along. I felt that I needed help, but there were no Feng Shui advisors in the area where I was living on the Mississippi Gulf Coast at the time. And so hiring a consultant was not an option. Taking a class was not an option. The internet was not back then, in 1998. It was not what it is today, so it wasn't as easy to find these resources. So, well, I decided to go ahead and buy books from different authors. And basically, I got my hands in every single book on Feng Shui, videos, audiobooks on Feng Shui that were available at the time, trying to make sense of it. And I found out that the more I studied Feng Shui, the more confused I was. It's not just that the information from one book was different to the information on another book, but actually it was contradictory. So some books were giving advice, and the next book was giving advice that was completely opposite to what the other book said. And so I was in a total state of confusion. And a studying style of mine has always been to do charts. Whenever I found that something was hard to understand, I would do flow charts and graphics to help me make sense of things. So I started doing this with Feng Shui. And the first thing I did is I found out, okay, what are all of the authors in Feng Shui agreeing on? And then I just decided to take that information that everybody was agreeing on as true. And then I didn't know how to proceed. It was just trial and error, looking at different Feng Shui information, trying it out in my home or the homes of my friends who wanted to be my guinea pigs. And so what had happened is that I was trying to make sense of this confusion, and then I found the help that I needed, and it came from an unexpected source. When I lived in Ecuador while I was going to the School of Architecture, I also was taking art lessons in a private atelier. And the woman who was my teacher, my painting teacher, she had, since then, she had moved back from Ecuador to Uruguay, her country of origin, and we had lost track of each other for about 3 years. And the interesting thing is that in those 3 years, she actually had become a practitioner of traditional Chinese medicine. So she knew a little bit about Feng Shui, and we started talking about it. We had very long conversations over the phone, and my long distance bills were really, really scary sometimes. But she was the best resource I had, and I discovered through my conversations with her that all knowledge in traditional China was actually integrated. So it is a very integrated culture. So the basic knowledge that you study to do Feng Shui is also the basic knowledge that you study to practice flower arrangement, martial arts, Tai Chi, and traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, herbology, or herbalism. And so I had this idea, that there's so much contradiction in Feng Shui because you can argue about Feng Shui. Sometimes when you make a Feng Shui change in a place, you cannot guarantee that something has happened as a consequence of the Feng Shui change that you made. But when it comes to the human body, there's really no arguing about it, because basically the person that is treated with acupuncture is going to get better or they're going to get worse. And so I decided to use acupuncture as a rule of thumb in comparing the home or the business space to a body and figuring out what things work when doing acupuncture on a body, and could you sort of do an acupuncture of the home. So my rule of thumb became, whenever I was acquainted with new information on Feng Shui, to check with my friend and see, would you use this in your practice of acupuncture or herbalism, and how would you use it? And that is how I started sifting what was true traditional Feng Shui knowledge from superstitious beliefs that have been attached to Feng Shui after the fact.